All right, this is the Left Wing Podcast. I'm John Cooper from Counterpoint Politics. Joining me is Desmond Price from Independent Thought and Chuck Cora from @Podlatia, as well as Sock from Twitch. He wants to just go by Sock. I'll let him introduce himself later. But today we'll be talking about Dianne Feinstein, what she to put things in a long story short context here, since February, she was out of the Senate due to health concerns. She missed a lot of key votes, particularly ones surrounding judges. So Biden was not able to push through his judges because she was absent from the Senate. Which, as a side note, I think it's crazy that we can't have vote by proxy, but whatever. And so that caused a lot of problems among Democrats, among the left, a lot of progressive candidates saying that she should retire. She is 89 years old, and she refused to do so. She came back recently and was talking to reporters, and one of them asked, how her time away had been, and she literally responded that she hadn't been away, that she had been at the Senate the entire time. And that to me is incredibly concerning. You can say what you will about, being ageist or against senior citizens, whatever, but when someone just straight up claims that they have been somewhere for several months that they haven't been, that is a very concerning just sign of, I'm not a doctor, but some sort of mental decline. And to have that person in one of the most powerful seats in government is dangerous, and should really be addressed. But anyway, I wanted to hear, I have a couple other thoughts on it, but wanted to open the floor discussion to you guys.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and go in this one. One of the things that I saw when I was looking at this story was it was a report out of Politico, which said that some of the reasons why Dianne Feinstein has yet to resign is because there are reports out there that leadership like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are angling for Adam Schiff to take her seat, which he's already announced his candidacy for the Senate in 2022. Now, one of the reasons why this is becoming a problem is because if Dianne Feinstein were to step down before her term were to run out at the end of next year, then Governor Gavin Newsom would have to appoint her successor, to which, he already was catching some flack for when this happened with Kamala Harris, for not appointing a Black woman. A lot of people are calling on him to appoint Barbara Lee if Dianne Feinstein were to step down. Now, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, again, according to this Politico article, seem to be trying to make sure that does not happen and to make sure that their buddy Adam Schiff actually does get this seat instead, to which is why there has been some resistance to her, like stepping down ahead of time, which is why they also claim in the article that you're seeing Nancy Pelosi coming out and calling all of these attacks against Dianne Feinstein ageist. So personally, if that article is in fact true, I think that that is incredibly nefarious and incredibly disgusting, because if this person is essentially being forced to being held in place so that somebody else can eventually take her seat in the 2022 or the 2024 general election, that is a gross abuse of power in my personal opinion. Does anybody feel differently?
No, not really. I think, so I remember, like I saw something the other day about there was like reporting done like a couple years back, right? Or like the reporting was about a couple years back that she was cognitively impaired for a very, very long, for multiple years, right? This isn't just like a new thing that just popped up out of nowhere, right? She had kind of been losing it since I believe before even her last re-election, right? Where she was dragged to the finish line by Barack Obama and other, DNC types, right? I think that it's sad, all right? Nobody who is cognitively impaired, right, at an old age should be in our Senate. Like it just shouldn't happen, right? Because now we're seeing, and I don't necessarily care too much about this, but Democrat judges or judges appointed by Joe Biden are not getting passed through. So our government's not working correctly because we have a senator that literally just can't be there, right? And even if she is there, she doesn't even know what's happening, right? it's wild to me that this is okay. And then attacks on her are misogynistic, right? Saying that she shouldn't resign. It's not misogynistic. It's not ageist. It's like, no, we just want to have a functioning government. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, my analysis is not going to be much different. I'll just preview it for you all. I think it's ridiculous that she is still in this role. I think she should have resigned yesterday. I think the fact that there is so much insulation around her either preventing her from resigning or convincing her that she shouldn't, or at least not trying to introduce a compelling reason as to why. I don't know. I'm not privy to those conversations, but it's honestly, it's unfair to the people of California. They deserve somebody that will represent them in the Senate who is mentally competent to be there. From what it sounds like, I don't want to pass judgment on it because I'm not personally privy to enter conversations, but all reporting seems to suggest that there's been significant cognitive decline. Just the quote that you all referenced is certainly evidence of that. It's not ageist to suggest that somebody is not capable of serving in office. And I think that the more that this is allowed to happen, the bigger the problem festers. Look, the average age, I don't remember what it is for the US Congress. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 70, probably like upper 70s, which is pretty damn old. And then you have this person who's breaching 90. Not only is it somebody who doesn't necessarily represent or is in touch with the values the majority of the people who are in their state, who are significantly younger, grew up in different generation, but it just robs people of having that adequate representation. You look at how much government is stalled on a good day when you do have people that are voting in the Senate, and look at it when she's taken away. And apologies, there are these maniacal dogs across the road. Hopefully that's not coming through. I just think that this should not be a debate. This should not be an issue that is subject to debate, because it's clear and it's obvious that she should resign. It is not harmful to the Democrats. Gavin Newsom's just going to appoint another Democrat, probably one that's more progressive than her. So from a Democratic standpoint, it's probably a net benefit. So I think it's just like, it's an open and shut case, in my opinion. I think that there's so much ego that goes around Washington. I have witnessed it firsthand. Her office is not immune to ego. I have interacted with members of her office for several years, some of which are still in that office, some which are not. There's a lot of ego in Senate offices, and I can't say for certain, but I have a feeling that there's ego driving this ambition to stay in office, and I think it's just ridiculous. It's a miscarriage of I don't want to say justice, but it's not fair to the people that voted for her and that she represents. And I think that she needs to do the right thing by resigning and allowing somebody else to serve in that really just important and prestigious role.
To put into perspective, because we're talking about age here, to put into perspective how old Dianne Feinstein is, she was born closer to the presidency of Abraham Lincoln than to the presidency of Barack Obama. There is no way. Yeah, that is an exaggeration. That's just math. There is no way that you can convince me that the democratic will of the people of California is genuinely to have an 89-year-old representing them. It isn't democracy. And it's a great example of how our electoral system can be manipulated to distort the will of the people into doing something that they do not want to do. Because correct me if I'm wrong, people of California, but there's no way that you want someone in the Senate who hasn't been there for 2 months and then also is now claiming that they were there because they genuinely think that they were. Like that's just not right. Doesn't matter if you're Republican, doesn't matter if you're Democrat, I don't care what your politics are. I think that 99% of Americans would agree that there's something wrong with that. And yet this person's just allowed to stay in power because the DNC wants her to, which also somehow is detrimental to themselves. And it doesn't make sense on any single level to me. And I think this is probably a relatively boring segment because we all agree, and every American should agree, yet I don't see mainstream news talking about this as the crisis of democracy that it is. And I think more people need to be talking about it.
Wait, so you said the DNC is prone to self-sabotage? No.
What?
Wild.
No, well, you know, some segments are gonna just be like that because
Mhm.
obviously I think some stories it's just it should just be uniform, right? I mean, because if you care about, you know, the what we're talking about right now in on the political left, we're seeing things happening on, you know, at a federal level when it comes to certain judges, you know, like striking down things like drugs like mifepristone, or you're seeing other things happening where certain judges are saying that, oh yeah, this ruling on guns is actually in fact unconstitutional. I mean, Trump correctly was pointing out about how many judges he was able to confirm during his tenure as president. And now, because Dianne Feinstein has not been in the Senate for months on end, there are so many judges that were not able to be confirmed, judges that we would like to have on the national bench to kind of counteract some of the other judges that are out there making decisions that might not be such a big fan of. So her effect is not just on the people of California, it's on the entire nation. Like the entire nation is feeling the repercussions of one person deciding to stay in power, to stay in office longer than they should be there.
Well, and like I'm gonna take it away from like the policy side of it, or like the implications of like her being the way she is. Like, just take it back to like a family level, right? It's sad seeing the state that she's in. She's 90 years old, right? She should be on, you know, like buying a beach house in Long Beach or whatever, and just literally living out the rest of her years there, you know, happy, retired, everything's good, you know, and then we can replace it with new, fresh blood, you know. And I think, you know, with the reporting of that her staff members, right, always have to escort her around because she might say something stupid, and then they have to correct the record of like, oh, what she really thinks. But it's like, well, we don't know what she really thinks because she's not making any sense, you know. And it's just it's really sad from a family perspective. And like her family should be, you know, culpable as well, because they're probably pushing her along to do this as well, right? They're supporting her through this. No one is going up to her and being like, hey, you know what, I think it's time, you know. And it's sad to see. I don't want to see anyone go through it, but you know, at some point you deserve some criticism for, you know, or like the people around her deserve criticism for pushing her through it, you know, for their own selfish interests, while this woman is deteriorating, you know. It's horrible to see.
So my final question here for you guys, serious question. Should there be an upper age limit on running for office or being in office?
I think I don't care as much about the age as I do the term limit, because if a 89-year-old wants to get elected for the first time to office, great for them. If they're capable of doing that, wonderful. There is no way that if Dianne Feinstein was running for the first time today that she would ever get elected. The only reason is because of the massive incumbency advantage that she holds. And so if you have term limits, I think the age thing kind of just irons itself out without having to be discriminatory.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, if you look at her predecessor, the person who held her seat before her, which she got into office in 92, I was 2 years old at the time. He is younger than her.
Oh.
Yeah, he's 85 currently, John Seymour. What I would say, yeah, because I think that I don't think that there's a set age necessarily that you can point to and say, well, this is an acceptable age, this is not. I think it's highly dependent on the person, their overall physical and mental health. But I agree. I think like this could have been resolved much quicker and easier when you have term limits. And the fact that so many members of Congress were in there before I was born should tell you something. I'm 33 years old.
See, now I will actually put an age limit on members of Congress and, you know, the presidency and whatnot. I think like the average age of retirement right now is right around 65, right? So if you retire at 65, I'd say, you know, if you worked your whole life and you want to get into politics at the age of 65, go for it. You get 10 years, right? You have until you're 75 years old. All right, then go retire and, you know, live the rest of your life. Like, I think like having people serve, you know, when they're super old in age, you know, we were talking about like relatability to, you know, the broader population or their constituency, right? Of like, because obviously as you get older, there's less people that are your age that you can relate to, right? So I think in order to keep it relatable to the broader population and to prevent instances like this happening, I think like around 75 would be good for me.
I think that go ahead, Desmond.
I was just gonna say, you know, I think we can't have it both ways. I think if we're not gonna have a cap on the upper age as we do currently, then there shouldn't be a cap on the lower age. As of right now, you can't run for president until you're 35. You can't run for Senate until you're 30. You can't run for Congress in the House until you're 25. Take those restrictions away. At least that way, it seems fair.
I would much rather a 30-year-old as president than an 89-year-old. That is for sure. But I think that the other problem with just age is that you have a shorter span of time that you care about. Like the priorities of someone who's going to be dead in the next 20 years are different than someone who's going to have to live through the next 60, 80 years. Yeah. And I think that if you look across the world at governments with older people, which is most of them, they're a little less concerned than the general population is about things like climate change. And I think that's just a natural factor of them being old, and they won't have to deal with it. No matter how much they might personally care about it, it's just not going to be as important to them as things that affect their lives right now, which is another great example of why you should have younger people running your country, because they have a longer term outlook. They have to live with their shit that they do.